The boarding gate at Terminal 7 buzzed with the usual chaos. Rolling suitcases, impatient sighs, and half-heard announcements over static. Among the crowd stood Anita Devlin, clutching her boarding pass with trembling fingers. Her eyes darted between the departure screen and her reflection in the glass, a reflection she had grown to dread. The curve of her waistline, the way her blouse strained at the seams, the faint flush of nervousness on her cheeks, all reminders of how the world never stopped reminding her of her size. Anita worked for Phoenix Petroleum, one of the country's leading aviation fuel suppliers. She was a senior contracts manager, sharp, composed, and brilliant. But outside the conference room, none of that mattered. On this day, she was just another passenger boarding a flight to London for a corporate meeting. When she reached the boarding counter, the airline staff, two young attendants, Kayla and Renee, exchanged a quick glance. It wasn't subtle. It never was. "Ma'am," Kayla said, smiling the kind of smile that hides a sting, "we'll just need to make sure you're comfortable in your seat. You've booked economy." Anita nodded. "Yes, seat 18C. Renee leaned closer to Kayla, whispering, "Hope the armrest survives this one," followed by a suppressed giggle. They thought Anita couldn't hear. She always did. The laughter wasn't new. She'd learned to armor herself with silence. "Thank you," Anita said quietly, collecting her ticket. She moved toward the gate, her dignity intact, her steps slow but deliberate. When she entered the plane, she could feel eyes scanning her, passengers suddenly adjusting their arms, pretending not to stare. She had learned to carry her shame with grace, but that day, fate decided to test her composure harder than ever before. Halfway through the 7-hour flight, turbulence hit. The aircraft jerked violently and the seatbelt sign blinked. Trays rattled and passengers gasped. Anita held on to her armrest, but her neighbor, a young man glued to his phone, complained aloud. "Oh, great, the big lady's blocking my way to the aisle." His words weren't cruel in tone, but cruel in truth. They sliced deep. Kayla, the same flight attendant from check-in, arrived to calm him. "Sir, please remain seated," she said with practiced politeness. Then turning to Anita, she added in a patronizing whisper, "Ma'am, maybe you could try to lean a bit less into his space? It's uncomfortable for other passengers." Anita froze. The humiliation turned her stomach cold. She tried to shrink, but there was nowhere to go. "I paid for my seat, same as everyone else," she murmured, her voice trembling. Kayla shrugged. "Of course, ma'am, but please be mindful. We'll try to make it more accommodating next time." A ripple of laughter from a nearby row followed. Anita bit her lip. She didn't cry, not then. But when the plane landed and passengers rushed off, she stayed behind a moment, waiting until the aisles cleared. As she stepped out, she overheard Kayla again, chatting with another attendant by the galley. "She could use 2 seats, honestly," Kayla said with a smirk. "Imagine the weight limit if she was luggage." The other replied. Both laughed, unaware that Anita stood behind them. Her breath hitched. Sharp, painful. She wanted to confront them. She wanted to scream. But instead, she walked away, tears finally breaking free, unseen amid the departing crowd. London was gray that week, but Anita's mind was darker still. The meetings went on, numbers, contracts, forecasts, but she barely heard the words. At night she sat in her hotel room, staring out at the rain-streaked cityscape, her reflection faint in the glass. She remembered her childhood, the way her mother used to say, "Never let them see you cry, Ani. The world feeds on tears." So she didn't cry anymore. She hardened. Back in Karachi, her office was a temple of control. Her subordinates respected her, even feared her precision. When she returned from the trip, she poured herself into work like never before. But that airline, those faces, they stayed with her. The name Sky Connect Airlines flashed like a scar every time she reviewed a contract. Months passed. Then, fate opened its second act. Phoenix Petroleum's biggest client, Sky Connect, was up for fuel contract renewal, a deal worth millions. Anita, being the senior contracts manager, had full authority to approve or decline. She opened the file and froze. There it was, the airline logo, the same blue wings she saw that day on the boarding gate, the same one she had silently promised herself never to forgive. For a moment she debated professionalism. Logic whispered, "Don't let emotions cloud your judgment." But pain whispered louder. "They laughed at you. They humiliated you. You owe them silence no more." Anita didn't act rashly. She was too smart for that. Instead, she began investigating, quietly, meticulously. Sky Connect had been late on multiple fuel payments. Their management had ignored environmental compliance clauses. Their customer satisfaction rating had plummeted. The numbers told a story, one that justified every ounce of what she planned to do. She drafted her report, crisp and factual. Due to repeated contractual violations and unpaid balances, Phoenix Petroleum will not renew its supply agreement with Sky Connect Airlines effective immediately. Her superior glanced at it. "You're sure about this, Anita? It's a big client." "Yes," she said calmly. "They're a liability." Her signature sealed the document. Her revenge, though cloaked in policy and professionalism, was personal and precise. 3 months later, Sky Connect Airlines was scrambling. Their operations were paralyzed at multiple airports due to fuel shortages. Delays piled up. News outlets started covering the mysterious termination of Phoenix Petroleum's fuel partnership. At a board meeting, Sky Connect CEO barked at his operations head. "Who at Phoenix made this call?" The man flipped through the file. "Anita Devlin, senior manager. She handled our last renewal." The CEO frowned. "I want a meeting with her. Set it up immediately." And that was the beginning of the reckoning. Anita received the request with a faint smile. She knew they'd come crawling back. They always did. She scheduled the meeting, not at their headquarters, but in Phoenix's executive office, where she held every ounce of power. The irony wasn't lost on her. The same airline that once humiliated her mid-air was now begging her for fuel on the ground. But she wasn't done yet.
The conference room at Phoenix Petroleum's headquarters gleamed with cold glass and silent power. Every inch of it radiated corporate dominance, the kind that made visitors straighten their posture and measure their words. At the far end of the mahogany table sat Anita Devlin, calm and unreadable, her black suit sharply pressed, her eyes steady behind rimless glasses. She was no longer the woman crushed by whispers on an airplane. She was the woman who signed contracts that could ground an airline. Across the table sat Jonathan Reeves, CEO of Sky Connect Airlines, flanked by 2 executives, and, to Anita's faint surprise, Kayla and Renee, the same flight attendants from that humiliating flight. They had been invited as part of the airline's Customer Relations Reform Initiative. Fate, it seemed, had a poetic sense of timing. Jonathan forced a professional smile. "Ms. Devlin, first of all, thank you for meeting us. We deeply value Phoenix's partnership. There seems to be some misunderstanding about the termination of our fuel contract." "There's no misunderstanding, Mr. Reeves. Your airline breached multiple clauses, delayed payments, environmental violations, and frankly, an appalling customer service record. The termination was a logical consequence." He shifted uncomfortably. "Yes, but we're correcting those issues. I'd like to negotiate reinstatement, perhaps a temporary extension while our board reviews." Anita leaned forward slightly. "Reinstatement is not on the table." Her voice was low, even, but it carried the weight of authority. Jonathan hesitated, glancing at his team. The tension thickened. Renee, sitting awkwardly near the back, whispered something to Kayla, who whispered back, not realizing Anita's eyes had locked on her. Anita smiled faintly, a smile that said, "I remember." Jonathan tried again. "Miss Devlin, this decision impacts thousands of passengers. If Phoenix cuts us off entirely, we'll have to cancel dozens of flights, including international routes. Surely we can reach some understanding." Anita paused for a long moment. Then she said softly, "Understanding is earned, not begged for." He blinked, taken aback. "Excuse me?" She rose slowly, walking toward the large window overlooking the city skyline. Her reflection appeared in the glass, poised, powerful, unrecognizable from the woman who once cried in an airport restroom. When she turned back, her eyes burned with quiet intensity. "Mr. Reeves," she said, "do you remember Flight 221 to London last March?" He looked puzzled. "I don't believe so." "You should," Anita said, "because that's when your staff mocked one of your passengers, a paying customer, a woman who was treated like an inconvenience rather than a human being." Kayla's face drained of color. Renee stiffened in her seat. Anita continued, her tone even but sharp. "Do you know what your attendant said about her weight? About the seat surviving her? About her being excess baggage?" The room went silent. Jonathan's mouth opened, then closed. Kayla stammered, Miss Devlin, I didn't realize you were the woman you laughed at." Anita finished. "No, you didn't. But you should have realized she was human." Kayla's eyes filled with tears. I'm so sorry. We were just—" "Just what?" Anita interrupted, her voice cool. "Just being cruel? Just turning someone's pain into your entertainment?" Renee looked down, trembling. Jonathan shifted uncomfortably, now understanding exactly who they were sitting across from. Anita took a step closer to them. "You see, Mr. Reeves, your staff thought they were mocking an easy target. They didn't know that target held the power to drain their fuel supply. Life is poetic like that." Jonathan exhaled slowly. "Miss Devlin, I assure you this behavior doesn't reflect our values. These attendants will be disciplined, and I personally—" Anita raised a hand. "Discipline won't fix a culture that feeds on arrogance. I don't want an apology. I want accountability." She placed a folder on the table, a collection of documented customer complaints, internal reports, and screenshots of negative press coverage about Sky Connect's service quality. "This," she said, tapping the folder, "is why your airline is collapsing, not because of me, not because of one contract, but because your entire structure is built on disrespect. You mock your customers, you mistreat your employees, and you expect loyalty in return." Jonathan swallowed hard. "What do you want us to do?" Anita tilted her head slightly, considering. Then she said, "Start over. Fix your systems, retrain your staff, and come back when you remember what decency looks like. Until then, Sky Connect will operate without Phoenix fuel." She turned toward the door. Meeting adjourned. But as she reached the exit, Kayla stood abruptly. "Miss Devlin, please, I know I was wrong. I've never forgotten that day. I was young, stupid, trying to impress my seniors. I regret it every single day." "Regret," Anita said, quietly, her back to them, "is the first step. Change is the second. Prove you've changed, not to me, but to the next person you meet who doesn't fit your idea of normal." She walked out, leaving them in stunned silence. That evening, Anita sat by her office window, watching the sunset bleed into the horizon. For the first time in months, she felt no anger, no ache, only peace, the kind that comes when you reclaim what was taken from you. Her assistant knocked gently. "Ma'am, the Sky Connect CEO just sent a follow-up email. They're offering full compliance to all conditions if we consider a partial renewal." Anita smiled faintly. "Let them sweat a little longer." She leaned back in her chair, closing her eyes. The echoes of laughter from that flight were gone, replaced by the quiet hum of triumph. Weeks later, a news headline made her chuckle. "Sky Connect Airlines overhauls customer policy after public backlash. Launches Dignity First initiative." At the press conference, the airline CEO announced their new training program for staff, one focusing on empathy, inclusion, and respect. Among the newly appointed training leaders was Kayla Turner, now leading sensitivity programs for cabin crews. Her speech was heartfelt, humble, and genuine. Anita watched it online from her office. When Kayla said, "We learned our lessons the hard way," Anita smiled softly. Sometimes revenge wasn't about destruction, it was about transformation. She hadn't ruined them, she had forced them to evolve. She opened her laptop and signed a brief memo. "Phoenix Petroleum to consider renewal with Sky Connect Airlines pending compliance verification. A. Devlin." Not out of mercy, out of mastery. Because true power, she realized, isn't in revenge. It's in choosing when and how to forgive.